Lesson 2, Risk Management. Here's our definition of what is risk management. It includes the process concerned with the identification, analysis, assessment, and control, and the avoidance or minimization or even elimination or acceptable risk. Here are the risk management steps. The first one is risk planning. That includes the process to identify all the risks that are in the project and then quantify them based on the level of impact into the project and the level of probability. Once you have that identification, then you need to monitor and even provide response whenever there is a risk event. Then you evaluate your response, you evaluate the process on how your risks are being then managed or identified, and then improve it. Improve the tools, improve the process, improve how you're managing the response to those risks. One of the tools that we use to have a better understanding of the relationship between probability and impact of a risk is that during the lifetime of a project, from the beginning to the end and in the different phases, the risk probability here is high at the beginning, but it goes down by the time you're closing the project, because probability is dependent on timing, and the longer time, the more time you have, the more probability that an event might happen. But the impact, the risk impact, goes the other way. It increases as you start getting closer to the project. That means that if something happens to the project before it closes, you might have a higher impact because you already made a lot of investment. You spent a lot of money already on the project, and there is very little time for you to do any changes or improvements. Here's the risk matrix. That is a tool that helps you understand and start managing your risk. You first do by identifying the tip and a description of the risk. The type of risk could be technical, schedule, or even a budget. Good description of the risks, what's going to happen, what's going to be the impact of the project in terms of what's going to be happening to cost, to the schedule, to delays, to the quality of the project. On each risk, then you need to identify and start quantifying them by the impact it will have on the project. High meaning it will be 5, 2 will be low, and then the probability, how you think that is going to happen. There is a high probability or a low probability that the risk will occur during the life of the project. So you also quantify them, you give them some values. The last column is your composite index. That is the multiplication between the impact and probability. In this case, 5 times 3 will be 15. That number helps you then organize and identify all those risks that you have based on the impact and probability. Here's the chart that shows you that relationship. Here's impact from low to high and probability from low to high. So those risks that the composite index is high, meaning they are going to be creating a lot of impact and high probability, those are the risks that you need to look after. Those are the most important ones. Then you have this other group, then a third group, and the last group. And for each one of these groups, we also have different types of strategies that helps you manage each one of them. The strategies for the first group the first one is called avoidance, that you need to take immediate actions. You need to do some work. You need to start. Don't let it to happen to chance. That means that put some budget, put somebody responsible, and try to find ways to avoid the occurrence of that risk. The second group, you need to mitigate, reduce the impact of the project. You can take some preventive actions. You can have some contingency plans to help you manage that risk. The third one is when you have lower levels of the index levels, you might find ways to maybe transfer that risk to another party, maybe hiring a consultant or somebody who can do that work, and that way you don't need to worry about it. And the last one is that the strategy is to accept. It means that the time and cost to try to avoid this risk can be higher than the impact that will have on the project. So in many cases, it's better to say maybe the delay is going to be 1 or 2 days. So that's the type of risk you don't need to pay too much attention. But it is important that you work and you do the work of identifying these risks and creating all your strategies. Here are some recommendations in risk management. Risks change over time. That is important. That's something we need to understand. There could be new risks as you start having more understanding about the project and understanding all the challenges that you have. You will find new risks. So you need to constantly updating your risk matrix. Identify the costs of risk. That is important because you need to make that cost-benefit analysis in terms of how much money you need to start putting in reserve for responding to a risk event. Understand also that there are internal and external risks. Internal risks usually happen within the project or the organization. They're created by that environment. The external risk is the external environment, things that you don't have much control. But having a different understanding is that where that can also help you identify where those risks are coming from. And make sure that every risk that is identified, you have a plan for it, they have an owner. It doesn't mean that the project manager needs to own all of those risks. You can then delegate that responsibility to other team members, but every risk must have an owner. So there is an action being done, somebody who's reporting on that progress, and then eventually you can make sure that you're having a handle on managing all your risks.